Football happy hour continuing here on CBS Sports HQ. And after a fifth straight losing season and a sixth season out of the playoffs, the Denver Broncos made some big changes this offseason. Most notable at the quarterback position, acquiring Russell Wilson from the Seahawks. And they're hoping a change of scenery will mean a big season from Wilson, putting them back into contention in what has been a turbulent offseason in the AFC West. As you take a look at some of the big moves, of course, these are the marquee moves. Denver trading for Russell Wilson, Khalil Mack, and J.C. Jackson joining the Chargers. You talked about that already. Chandler Jones, Davante Adams added to the Raiders. We're going to talk about that. And, of course, with the Chiefs, with Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. A couple more targets for Patrick Mahomes to throw to. Well, let's talk about the Denver Broncos. And for more on what the Broncos did and how they may or may not stack up, let's bring in NFL analyst Ryan Wilson. Ryan, Tom Brady changed teams, won a Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford changed teams, won a Super Bowl. Can Russell Wilson continue this trend of changing teams and winning a Super Bowl right out of the gate?
First things first, Jeremy. Charles Davis doing these hits from his vacation spot. Here's the breaking news. I'm on vacation with Charles Davis, but I had the good common sense to put a green screen behind me so as not to offend those who aren't yet on vacation. Charles, I'll be there in a second. Let me do this hit. Just thinking about you guys back there in Fort Lauderdale studio. So, to your question, Jeremy, what are we doing here? So you mentioned Tom Brady. Tom Brady played in a terrible division, so that felt like it sort of greased the wheels on that path to the Super Bowl. But there's no such thing with Matthew Stafford in terms of that situation. He had to play in an incredibly tough division in the NFC West. They still found a way to get it done. Jaquazi Tart sort of dropped that arm punt. Maybe that changes things. 49ers win that football game in the playoffs. Didn't happen. The Rams are champions. So what does this mean for Russ Wilson? Well, Russ Wilson plays in an incredibly difficult division. He came from the previous division where Matthew Stafford won that Super Bowl. So he understands what it takes to play against the best of the best. The problem, of course, is that all three of those teams, other than Denver, are going to be really, really, really good. We heard Charles Davis talk about the Chiefs and the Chargers and how they're going to make a lot of noise at the top of that division. We'll talk about the Raiders in a second. Look, of all the places to land in terms of quarterbacks making moves in the offseason, this is a pretty good spot if you're both the Denver Broncos and Russ Wilson in terms of the merits that appears to make a lot of sense. I just think it's going to be a tough climb, tough sledding, if you will, for both the Broncos and Russ Wilson. Not because they're not, like the marriage isn't great, as I mentioned, and Russ Wilson isn't a future Hall of Famer. It's just this ain't the AFC South. This isn't even the NFC South. And I think a lot of things have to go right for Russell Wilson in year one in Denver. And we'll see if it happens. But as we sit here, I'm leaning towards the Chiefs and the Chargers to make the most noise in the AFC West right now.
And as you mentioned, the good thing for Denver is at least Wilson is battle-tested coming from the division, one tough division, and going to another. Overall, Denver added Wilson. I mean, they added DJ Chark, wide receiver, Jared Davis, safety Deshaun Elliott. But was there an underrated offseason move for Denver for you?
They brought back Melvin Gordon, and I thought that was pretty important, not critical to what they're trying to do there. They have Javonta Williams, last year's second-round pick, who had a fantastic season. But when you look at the numbers, Javonta Williams had 203 carries last year for 903 yards, 4 touchdowns. Melvin Gordon, 203 carries for 918 yards and 8 touchdowns. They were both contributors in the pass game, 43 catches for Javonte, 28 for Melvin. And I think he comes in, provides that relief to Javonte Williams, who is the workhorse back now. But we know what Melvin Gordon can do, the former first-round pick with the Chargers. And I think that's one more element of that offense that's in place that returns for Russ Wilson as he's surrounded by so many good players. Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. And I think this offense is going in the right direction. The offensive line will be a little better. But I love the addition, or the re-addition, if you will, re-upping for one more year, Melvin Gordon as the tandem to Javonte Williams.
Yeah, seeing him go over 900 yards, 29 years old, and playing over 900 yards in the season, 10 total touchdowns, certainly a big part of that Broncos offense. Okay, so what was an offseason move for Denver that kind of made you scratch your head?
There aren't any. And typically you can point to something and say, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. I thought everything they did this offseason was textbook and perhaps exceeded what you might expect them to do. They are a considerably better football team today than they were 2 months ago. You can see here, and we haven't even talked about Nathaniel Hackett, who seems like he's going to work out really well. It helps to have a franchise quarterback. We talked about Gordon. They re-upped Josie Jewell and Kareem Jackson. They lost Drew Lock, Noah Fant, and Shelby Harris as part of that trade. But they also got Randy Gregory, they snaked him from the Cowboys. They got DJ Jones, who when healthy is a really good interior defensive lineman. Kawan Williams can play in the secondary. He'll help right away. Billy Turner adds some depth along the offensive line, the former Packers player there. And we talk about those guys that they re-up. So I think this is a notable, says right there at the top of the graphic there, this is a notable offseason for the Broncos in that they did everything right. It starts with Russ Wilson, but again, Randy Gregory on that defense going opposite Bradley Chubb. That's a huge development in division where you have to get after the quarterback. Patrick Surtain's coming back for year 2 after that outstanding season last year. You have Justin Simmons. We talked about Kayshawn Williams coming as well. So you go down the list of things that they've done, and they've done them all as well as you could hope, and they've exceeded those expectations, and that's great news for Russell Wilson, who had a ton of complaints, not necessarily publicly, but we know privately, Jeremy, that he wasn't happy with the way things were going in Seattle. He worked his way out of the Seahawks organization, and he landed in, as I've mentioned already, about the best-case scenario. The only issue is he should ask the Denver Broncos to be traded to the AFC South, and then I would be all on board for that Super Bowl run.
Well, and that offseason getting them plus 250 in terms of their odds to win the division, second best, sitting there behind the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, the Broncos had 9 selections in the 2022 NFL Draft. They took 3 defensive players in their first 4 picks. So when you look at the class overall, which of their rookies will make the biggest impact in year 1, do you think?
Well, we just saw the graphic where Noah Fant was part of the trade package. When Russ came over from Seattle, Noah Fant went to the Seahawks. What did they do? The Broncos, they drafted tight end Greg Dulcich out of UCLA. He is a pass-catching tight end first and foremost. He can improve as a run blocker, but that's not why you have him out there. He was the fastest 40 time among the tight ends at the Combine. He's a playmaking threat every time he has the ball. He has the hair. He looks, by the way, he looks like the cool version of, God, what's that guy's name that used to sing those cover songs? Weird Al Yankovic, there it is. That is a cool Weird Al Yankovic. That's a throwback for me and you, Jerry. No one else probably knows who that guy is. But Greg Dulcich not only can do cover songs, he is a threat in the middle of that football field. We talked about Cortland Sutton. We talked about Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. He's going to have an opportunity to play sooner rather than later because of what he's going to bring to the field. I can't believe that I got Weird Al Yankovic. It was on the tip of my tongue. It came to me. Shout out to Weird Al.
I was going to say, he's giving me very Troy Polamalu vibes there. I thought he's going to get that Head & Shoulders commercial right out of the gate. Yeah, Dulcich, 2021, great season for him. 42 receptions, 725 yards, and 5 touchdowns at UCLA. Okay. Well, the NFL schedule makers, I mean, we know they have no chill. They're giving Russell Wilson his old team right out of the gate in Seattle. So when you look at their schedule overall, Ryan, is there a stretch in the schedule that worries you in particular?
Yeah, you mentioned the Seattle game. I'm not worried about that. We've seen Drew Lock play. Perhaps Baker Mayfield ends up being the quarterback. We'll find that out. Ooh. But I think once you get down to week 13 through week 18, things get a little tough. You can see it here in the graphic. At Baltimore, Chiefs on Sunday night, Cardinals. We'll see. They usually collapse late season, so maybe that's a win. We'll see. The Super Bowl defending champ, Rams. At the Chiefs, and you finish with the Chargers. And my goodness, that is an absolute tough 2.5 months of football, 6 games there. And 3-3 feels like you would feel really good about that if you're the Broncos. You're going to have to front load those wins, stack those wins, as you like to say, before you get to week 13, because there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting, and the injuries come into effect at that point in the season. We play the extra game now. They're going to be 17 games. You got to keep Russ Wilson healthy and upright to have a chance in those football games. But that feels like an incredibly tough stretch, one that I would imagine Nathaniel Hackett and Russ Wilson would rather see perhaps earlier on in the schedule. But again, it is what it is. Weeks 13 through 18, it's going to be tough sledding for the Broncos.
Yeah, they start at Seattle and then get Houston and San Francisco at home, then Vegas in that first divisional game. Okay, well, the Broncos have not had a double-digit winning season since they won the Super Bowl back in 2015. Forget winning the Lombardi. Have they done enough to at least get double-digit wins for you?
Yeah, and I've gone through this schedule a few times. I think they go 2-6 in those final eight games we just looked at, week 13 to week 18, and they still finish 10-7. So that means they're going to win a lot of football games early on. And if they can pull out some extra wins over those final 6 football games and improve that record, then we're looking at 11 maybe 12 wins, but I think 10 feels about like the sweet spot. I wouldn't feel comfortable giving them more than that, just because, as you noted, they haven't won a lot of football games in recent history in the post-Peyton Manning era. Russ Wilson certainly changes that, but I do wonder if it's going to take some time to get acclimated in Denver, no pun intended, because of the elevation, but because of the competition in that division. Like I said, this isn't Tom Brady going to Tampa Bay, where there wasn't a lot to go up against it with those other teams in the NFC South. I think this is going to be a large ask for Russell Wilson. Is he up for the task? Yeah, I'm sure he will be, but I think that's more double-digit win conversation than, oh, we're going to the Super Bowl in year one with Russ Wilson conversation.
And we always love a good futures bet, Ryan. I'm not sure that you'd be willing to lay out on the Broncos at 16-1 to win Super Bowl 57, but what futures bet would you place in regards to the Broncos right now?
And this is going to be a tough one, too. This could come down to the wire. The Broncos make the playoffs is minus 170 right now. So now, if you're doing the math, you're saying, well, the Chiefs are going to make it. The Chargers are probably going to make it, even though they haven't made it yet in the Justin Herbert era. But this feels like the year they get over the hump. So are 3 teams from the AFC West going to the playoffs? And if you're taking the Broncos, the answer is going to have to be yes, unless one of those other 2 teams magically implode. It doesn't feel like that's going to happen. But I'm going to go minus 170. The Broncos make their way to the postseason. And again, that means 3 teams from this division, and it means a team from another division is going to be on the outside looking in. So is 10 wins going to be enough? That's going to be the other question. I think it will be, because the conference in the AFC is so incredibly competitive, so much more so than what we've seen in the NFC, where they only feel like there are a handful of teams that have a legitimate chance to make deep playoff runs. But minus 170, Denver goes to the playoffs, and hey, once they get there, who knows? Anything can happen. Sprinkle a little 16-1 on that if you want to, Jeremy. Maybe they win the whole thing.
Well, speaking of 16-1, I mean, Russell Wilson has never received a vote for MVP. 16-1 to win the NFL MVP. Given the situation that he's moving into in Denver, what do you think of those odds? Would you place a little punt there, maybe?
Here's the thing, and I think this comes courtesy of my Pick Six podcast colleague John Breach. She brings this up every time. Last year, I was on the Justin Herbert MVP bandwagon. You have to win the division historically, according to the voters, the way they vote, in order to get that MVP award. Justin Herbert obviously didn't win the MVP award. The Chiefs won the division and went to Aaron Rodgers, not surprisingly. So the question becomes, can Russ Wilson win the division in year one in the AFC West? I don't think so. I mean, you look at this here, plus 700, Josh Allen. He's winning that division. Patrick Mahomes feels like he's the favorite. We'll see if Justin Herbert has anything to say with that. 2 spots down, hey, there's Justin Herbert at plus 1,200. And I think Joe Burrow is probably a better bet, and Vegas agrees, because there's a much better chance. I feel like that the Bengals outlast the Ravens in that division. We don't know what's going on with Deshaun Watson and his availability in Cleveland. And there sits Russ Wilson. So if you think Russ Wilson and the Broncos are going to take the division, by all means, 16-1 looks great. I just think that might be a lot to ask in a division that also includes Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes. And, hey, let's not forget Derek Carr.
Russ has been in the conversation, but has yet to get that MVP vote. That's the situation in Denver. NFL analyst Ryan Wilson breaking down the Broncos. Ryan giving them some pretty high marks and plenty of hope heading into the fall of 2022. For more on the NFL offseason, every move broken down in detail and what it all means, check out the Pick Six podcast. Ryan's on there. Will Brinson, John Breach as well. In the latest episode, they're answering your questions via the mailbag. Download and follow the Pick Six podcast wherever you get your podcast audio. You can also watch the program on YouTube.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.